Welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. Your guys, Cody and Derek, back for another episode, guys. And even though the 2023 season is officially done for the Indianapolis Colts, the Indianapolis Colts now have officially secured 15th overall in the 2024 NFL Draft. Derek, I think that's a pretty good position considering the Indianapolis Colts very well were this close, to going to the playoffs and winning the division. But the fact that they don't obviously still stings, but still pretty good draft position here, Derek, for the Colts to do a lot of different things, still in striking distance in a lot of ways to get some top players or potentially, make a trade with that pick. We've seen the Colts when in a similar position back in 2020 when they were right in the teens, early teens, make a trade for DeForest Buckner. So there's a lot that this team could do with the 15th overall pick. What are your overall reactions here to the Colts and this, final here for them picking 15th overall in 2024?
Well, you had a winning season and you get a top 15 pick in the draft. Hey, listen, I'm not overall complaining about where we're at right now. Yeah, 15th is definitely going to be a very interesting one because we can dissect this a million different ways. And again, guys, we're going to be talking about this pick for the next 3.5 months, really. There's a lot that goes into this decision. Like you said, Cody, as long as Chris Ballard doesn't trade the pick away, like we have seen in some recent years, like you mentioned in 2020, when the Colts had the 13th overall pick, acquired DeForest Buckner, which the 49ers eventually used to draft Javon Kinlaw, who was DeForest Buckner's replacement. We obviously saw how that turned out for Indianapolis. They definitely won that trade. So it will be interesting to see how Indy approaches this situation because you're sitting in the middle, right? You're sitting right there in the middle. So there's a lot of flexibility that you have with Indy in this situation. Do you, as Indy, think, oh, we can maybe actually trade up with some of these teams? There is the chance that, Indy, maybe they say there's a potential receiving option, or there's this elite corner that they just have to get, or there's this elite edge rusher that they know that is going to hit for them. Then there's that option to try to trade up multiple different spots to be able to acquire that situation. So there's definitely the option for that. There's always the option to trade back. You know how Chris Ballard is. We know he loves those draft picks, and even wanting to potentially trade back a few draft picks might not be the worst thing in the world that we could see, because if the draft board falls the way we want it to, there's definitely a lot of action there. And honestly, Cody, I think at 15th, it's a great position for Indianapolis, because I can count at least 2 teams right off the bat that are going to be taking quarterbacks, and at least 3 offensive linemen that are going to be taken early on in this. So I would not be surprised if a player that the Colts have already been looking at through this draft process already is available at number 15 for Indianapolis. It's really just all going to come down to what Indianapolis finds is the best thing for them. And you just got to also kind of look at the remainder of the teams around them and see what teams are going to be looking for what. At the end of the day, we look at how many picks the Colts have in this draft. Only 7, right? Only 7 for Indianapolis so far. So it is a very strange situation compared to last year where Indy had 12 picks, right? So this is a much lower amount. Now, there could be some compensatory picks that could come in here, maybe some 3rd or 4th rounders that will help to incentivize that a little bit. But I will say this, Cody, I looked at it from a couple different sites. I know Tankathon has a couple of mock draft simulations already going on, and I know a couple other places that I've seen where Indy at 15 they have Gerard Verse being the guy that the Colts select, the edge rusher out of Florida State. Many people who say is the number one edge guy in this whole draft class. So that's definitely an interesting pick. I think ultimately for me on whether or not Indy's going to stay at 15 really just depends on if Ballard could acquire some more draft picks before the draft starts. If he's not able to, then I could see Indy trading this pick away.
Yeah, but like you said, like I feel like there's going to be a lot of options for Indy, and two positions that they aren't going to address. I think we can pretty safely say that unless something crazy happens. Quarterback, offensive tackle. I don't think they need to address either of those positions. I think those are some of the two you're like, nope, we feel good about where we're at in our present and our future moving forward. And so you mentioned it, 3 quarterbacks probably going pretty early in this draft. We already know obviously Marvin Harrison's going to go pretty early as well. But you have different guys like the guy out of Penn State. I can't even pronounce his last name.
What are you talking about?
Oli Ulu Fashanu, the offensive tackle from Penn State. Obviously, you have Joe Alt from Notre Dame as well, who's going to go pretty high in this draft. But there are, Derek, a ton of pass rushers, like a ton of guys that are fringe top 10 picks that you could, arguably fringe top 10 picks. Jared Verse being one of those guys. You have guys like Latu out of UCLA. Obviously, you have Dallas Turner out of Alabama. You have a guy like Kool-Aid McKinstry there who's right around that range. So, a lot of different guys. And then there are a few receivers as well that you could probably throw in there also. Keon Coleman, another Florida State guy. Different players there that you look at that. And who knows? Maybe there's a guy like Brock Bowers that the Colts feel like they could trade up for. Like, all that to say, I feel like this bodes really well for the Colts where they're at because there's a ton of guys that are going to go early for positions of need the Colts don't need. And there's going to be a lot of opportunities for Indianapolis to maybe get the best pick of the litter when it comes to non-quarterback, non-offensive tackle type of players. And so that's definitely really exciting that the Colts are right there in striking distance. And if one of these players, as they're in their pre-draft process and stuff, stands out about the rest, Derek, I would not be shocked if they traded up and got a guy. But also in the same way, there's a ton of guys still sitting there at 15, and they want to trade down and acquire a few more picks and still get their guy. We've seen them do that in the past, and it's worked out. So, yeah, ton of options here. And you also mentioned as well, Derek, just the fact that the Colts could go out and they could trade the 15th overall pick for a veteran, different guys potentially at the edge. I know like a guy like Brian Burns is a big name because the Panthers obviously need all the draft capital they can get right now. So maybe Burns is a candidate, somebody like that who is on a bad football team, but is still a very, very good player in his own right. And I'm sure there's other players. That's just the first guy that stood out to me. So the Colts have a ton of options, all that to say. A ton of options of what they can do here at pick number 15. And it's really exciting because you feel like this team played well. They had a winning season, but they're still in striking position here, Derek, to really get a splash impact player here at 15, or if they trade up or if they trade down or if they traded away. So really feel good about 15th overall for the Indianapolis Colts. That's for sure.
I'm willing to be that guy that says that you need to go best player available at the spot that you're at. I'm more than willing to be in that situation. If we're talking about wide receiver, hey, listen, if somehow Malik Neighbors or Romeo Adunzin or, somebody like that falls into the teens and you're Indy and you feel like you could trade up and be able to get the guy that you want, then I'm all for it. I'm all for doing that or staying put one way or the other. But like you said, with Brock Bowers, again, the tight end position, we don't necessarily need that spot, but we've seen what Brock Bowers has been able to do in Georgia. We know this guy's the best tight end in college football, and we've seen what kind of weapon he is in Georgia's offense. I can only imagine what he could do in a Shane Steichen-led offense, what he would be able to provide for Anthony Richardson going forward. Like you said, with Kool-Aid McKinstry or Cooper DeJean, corners at that spot. If you feel that the corner spot right there is what you need to do. I was thinking about it earlier, Cody, and I was thinking about it saying I would prefer if Indy was going to get a corner. I would much rather it be in free agency rather than in the draft because I didn't necessarily know if Indy should take that first round pick and have it be a corner because I just didn't necessarily think that could be the best thing for you. But again, unless you know that Cooper DeJean and Kool-Aid McKinstry are off the board by the time your pick gets there and you want to take a chance on them, I would seriously suggest that the Indianapolis Colts go with a different option there. And again, guys, this is something that we're going to continuously talk about for a long time. But my feeling is the same, that if you are at 15, you take best player available. And whichever one, and if there's multiples, right? If Kool-Aid McKinstry's still there, if Cooper DeJean's there, if Romeo Odunzon's there, and there's another wide receiver that's there, or Gerard Verse is there, you pick whichever one you think is going to make your team instantly better the moment they step on the field. I don't care who it is, but I really think that Indy should try and go with best player available. You don't need offensive linemen. You don't need running back. You don't need quarterback. Outside of those positions, nothing is off limits for me, Cody.
Yeah. And you do feel like the Colts, I know that there is that tendency to say, hey, the Colts should trade down, get more picks. Derek, I don't know how you feel about this, but I'm like, the Colts have a lot of these good players, but I think where they lack in certain areas, like pass rush, even to certain degrees, you like playmakers. Even though we love Michael Pittman, we love Josh Downs, they just need like impact guys that defenses or offenses are terrified about, right? They need that number one pass rusher. And people will say, oh, the Colts had 8 sacks with 4 different guys. Why in the world would you say they need a pass rusher? Well, I mean, just look at the last 2 games, Derek. Really the last 6 quarters, if you will, a second half of the Raider game and the entirety really of the Texans game. And that tells the whole story. And that's a big reason why CJ Stroud was able to do what he was able to do. Aiden O'Connell was able to do what he was able to do, in that second half. It's because the pass rush, while it has some good moments, they still truly lack that number one guy. And also with wide receiver, you love Michael Pittman, you love Josh Downs, but can you imagine, Derek, what a Brock Bowers would do for your just playmaking ability, or what, like you said, like a Malik Neighbors would do, or whoever, insert whoever player you want there. Like, I just genuinely feel like that's where the Colts need to get better, is getting some legit stars at premium positions, like wide receiver, pass rusher, heck, even a shutdown corner. I don't care what it is, but they got to do something there, because that is what I feel like they're lacking in a lot of ways. They have a lot of good players. I would say they have a lot of, B to B plus players, but they need some A's and A plus players, a little bit more on their roster. It's a good roster, but I think it lacks certain star power that maybe some of the other AFC contenders are looking for, and have right now in a lot of ways. So that's what I think the Colts need to do. And I know, Derek, we're going to talk about it ad nauseum this offseason. We have a long way to go before the draft in April. So we have a lot to talk about, but there's a lot of options here for the Colts, all that to say. So very exciting. I'm very much looking forward to this whole process and breaking down all these prospects. And Derek, the cool thing is, like, last year we knew it was going to be quarterback. Like, there was no question. Quarterback's got to be the pick. It was just who's going to be the guy. Now this year, it's not just one certain position. We have a couple we think that would be good, but you just genuinely don't know which position the Colts are targeting, or will target, I guess, because it's still early in the 2024 draft. And that makes it even more exciting, I think. So really looking forward to this whole process, and feel like the Colts are in good position to do a lot of good things, continue to build around Anthony Richardson, continue to build with Shane Steichen. And I'm really excited to see what they do.
Yeah, and I think it's quite crazy because I think last year, there was doubts on whether or not Ballard was going to address the quarterback in the draft. But I think as it got closer, I think the majority of us knew, right? Like we had that pretty big gut feeling that it was going to be a quarterback of some kind, right? But this year, like you said, I mean, you have legitimately three different positions that you could attack in any given way here. I mean, literally, it depends on how free agency goes, whether or not you bring other people in, whether or not you re-sign some of these guys. So, free agency is going to tell a lot about how this is going to get addressed. But yeah, it definitely is. It's definitely going to be crazy on whether or not what the Colts are going to do because, like you say, you can go wide receiver, you can go defensive line, you can go secondary. I mean, you could go any different direction here, and that could play in Ballard's favor a lot this time around because then if you're trying to deal with these other teams, some of these other teams may not get a good understanding of where you are trying to go with. So it helps with that aspect of nobody quite knows what you're actually going to do this offseason. So it's going to be fun, man. It's going to be fun to see what this Indianapolis Colts team does with this offseason and what they do with that 15th overall pick.
Yep, absolutely. So, guys, that'll do it for this one. Let us know your thoughts on the Indianapolis Colts picking 15th overall in the 2024 draft. Is there a certain position you'd like to see them go for? Is there a certain prospect or maybe even a group of prospects that you guys would want the Indianapolis Colts to potentially look at and draft with that 15th overall pick? Are you team trade up? Are you team trade back? Are you team trade for a veteran, or are you team stay right where you are, take the best player available, and we roll? Let us know all those things in the comments below. But that will do it for this one, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. And as always, guys, go Colts.